Hello, my name is James Arroyo, and this is Chapter 13, Preparing and Researching Presentations. Whenever someone asks me, how do I improve my public speaking skills? How do I overcome my public speaking anxiety? How do I clearly communicate my ideas to a large audience? I tell them the same thing. Those who prepare do better. Those who practice do better. Those who research do better. So that's where we are going to start to prepare and research smarter versus harder. But before we jump into that, why learn and practice public speaking? Well, speaking publicly is powerful both personally and professionally, which will give you an edge. Personally, we experience uh, many forms of communication apprehension. Public speaking being one form, but there are others. We may feel communication apprehension in a conflict situation, in a feedback scenario, a time when we are meeting someone new. So, by overcoming one communication apprehension of public speaking anxiety, it will allow us to feel more comfortable attempting to overcome other communication apprehensions we experience. It is also important professionally. What is leadership if not communicating your ideas to a large audience? And in professional settings, you are going to have to improve leadership skills if you do want to move up up the ladder of the organization. And both of these will give you an edge above others because most people are nervous about public speaking anxiety and as a result do not engage with it. And with all anxiety, if you do not engage with it, it will only get worse. So, to recap, it improves your upward mobility. It also improves your leadership skills because public speaking and leadership are inextricably linked. In public speaking, in leadership, you have to communicate your ideas to a large audience clearly and effectively. You have to create identification and build a sense of community around shared values. You also have to be able to influence your audience to the right course of action. In this class, with public speaking, we will be learning how to communicate our ideas clearly and effectively using organization. We will also be learning how to persuade an audience of and influence them into a certain course of action. And within persuasion, we will also learn how to build a sense of community around shared values to then influence them into these actions. So, improving our public speaking improves our leadership skills. Increasing social influence will also be that, and improving relationship building skills. When we are able to communicate our ideas to people clearly and effectively, that will improve relationships as well. Public speaking is composed of three big parts: a speaker, an audience, and a message. And we have to understand these three parts to have an effective public speech. There are three big speaking goals: to inform, to persuade, to entertain. We are going to be informing this in this class. We are going to be persuading in this class. We are not going to be entertaining in this class, but we might maybe at the end. So, informative. Informative speeches increase audience understanding. They should be new information, relevant to the audience's world, and useful to their useful information for them. It could explain a plan, or process, describe objects or places, characterize a state of affairs, or just show and inform us of a certain concept. This is going to be an example of an informative speech about alopecia, and we're going to be showing some of the things that are very valuable within this video.
You have probably never thought about what life would be like if you didn't have any hair. When I was 2 years old, I was diagnosed with alopecia. This disease caused all of my hair to fall out, and I haven't had any hair since. Many people don't know what alopecia is, and they assume, well, if somebody's bald, they either have cancer or they shave their head for some unknown reason. My job today is to inform you on what alopecia is, who it affects, and the types of treatments that are available.
So, in this small section right here, she has not only grabbed the audience's attention, she has shown why she's a credible source. She's also previewed her topic and her 3 main points, all of which are going to be things that we are going to be discussing, but this is going to be a preview and a sample for you to engage with and have with you as you start to develop your informative speech. We will continue.
We will begin with what alopecia is. It's an unpredictable autoimmune disease that causes hair loss on the scalp and other parts of the body. The immune system mistakenly attacks the hair follicles, causing the arrest of the hair growth system. There are 3 stages in the hair growth process. First is the anagen stage. Now this stage is when the hair grows within the follicle. The second stage is the catagen phase, and this is when the hair stops growing within the follicle. And then the next stage, the last, is the telogen phase, and it's called the resting stage, but this is when the hair pushes through the follicle and it's the hair that you have on your head. There are 3 types of alopecia. The first is alopecia areata. Now this is seen as patches, mostly on the scalp, but it can also occur on such as a man's beard or on the legs or arms, just in patches. The second is totalis, and this is seen as scalp hair loss, and it usually does not affect the rest of the body. And then the third is alopecia universalis, which is the rarest form, and go figure, the type that I have to have, and it causes total body hair loss. As you can see, I wear fake eyelashes and eyebrows and makeup and stuff to hide the fact that I don't have eyelashes, eyebrows, and even nose hairs, but I don't wear makeup for the nose hairs. But my friend Aaliyah here doesn't have any of that. She just goes with whatever, and she's beautiful without all of it. But that's how alopecia universalis is seen. In all forms of alopecia, the hair follicle stays alive, and it's ready.
So, first, she discussed what it is based off of the multiple types. Her first main point is what it is. The first sub-point of that main point are the types of alopecia. She now will go on to her second main point, which is how it how it works. But something to keep in mind is the support that she uses as we will discuss, are going to be examples, statistics, and testimonial. One of the big things that she brought up is personal experience. While usually our main goal is not to have a lot of personal testimony, she gets away with it and does a good job with it because she is identifying with her audience and making it more relevant to them, because if the audience is watching her, the audience is starting to identify with her, and if she has been affected by this, it makes it relevant to them as well.
To resume growth if it just receives the right signal. Now, the signal would trigger it to go into that telogen phase for the hair to grow. So, researchers are looking for that signal in the meantime. There are no symptoms to alopecia, so after giving this speech, if you're all scared you're going to lose your hair, I'm sorry, you can't go to the doctors and have them tell you if you're gonna or not, because it's unpredictable. According to the National Alopecia Areata Foundation, 2% of the population is affected by this disease. 5 million of those people live here in the United States. So who among the 2% of the population does alopecia affect?
So she has cited her statistics. One of the big challenges that rests with all speeches is that we need to cite where we are getting our information from, because if we don't, especially with statistics and testimonial, then it could have come from anywhere. I could have made it up. And we do not want that to be what people take away from our speech, and that is why citing our information is important. We'll talk about how to do that.
Well, it affects children, adults, men, and women of all ages. Scientists found that even mice and some dogs and cats can experience this disease. I actually have a friend who has a dog with alopecia. It's kind of funny. When I was telling her about what I had, why I didn't have hair, she's like, "My dog has that." And I was like, "No way." Dr. Angela Cristiano explains that they are doing genetic studies to find out what gene this hair loss disease lies on. Therefore, they're looking for the hereditary aspect of this disease.
So, not only did she have expert testimony with Dr. Angela Cristiano, I guess, but before that, she discussed some neat to know information, which is that dogs can get it too. Informative speeches are based in need to know information as well as neat to know information. Again, these are all things that we're going to be discussing later, but the general idea is that we want to have some vibrant information, some interesting, some neat to know information, as well as some need to know information. The need to know information would probably be the information from Dr. Angela Cristiano, whereas the need to know information, dogs can get it too. I will never forget that dogs can get alopecia as well. And humor injected also grabs the audience's attention further. Let's go ahead and continue.
A statistic from the National Institute of Arthritis and Musculoskeletal and Skin Disease, also known as NIAMS, states that 1 in 5 people with alopecia also have another family member with this disease. It also occurs in people who have other autoimmune diseases in their family, such as diabetes and rheumatoid arthritis and so on. In my family, I have a great aunt with alopecia. Her grandson, who's my third cousin, has alopecia universalis like I do. I have a first cousin with alopecia areata. And I also have diabetes, rheumatoid arthritis, and thyroid problems all in my family, so I'm not surprised I have alopecia with all that running in my blood. Children are the most often affected. However, it is commonly seen and diagnosed in adults as well. I feel like it'd be a little bit easier for men to deal with this disease today, considering it's more socially acceptable for them to be bald, compared to women, considering we always get questioned. I always get questioned. Just this past weekend, I got questioned by a guy in my dorm room, my dorm hall, and he asked me if I shaved my head just to get this tattoo. So I had to go through and explain the whole situation, but it was pretty fun. He was asking me all kinds of questions. Although it's more acceptable for men to deal with this, it's equally difficult to handle. Can you imagine losing your hair right now at your age? I know that I can't. I grew up with alopecia. Like I said, I had it since I was 2, but I'm 20 now, and I can't imagine like having hair my whole life and all of a sudden it just being gone. And for this reason, alopecia can cause severe psychological trauma in men and women and children. Now that you know the basics of what alopecia is and who it affects, I'm going to tell you a little bit about some of the treatments that are available. In alopecia areata,
transitions are very important, not just in informative speeches, but in all speeches, because you only get to hear each sentence of any speech once, and if you miss it, you miss it. So having transitions that review what you've said and preview what you're about to say are like those roadmaps that give the audience some time to be like, oh, okay, we talked about this. Now we're talking about something else, so that the audience is not lost when you transition from main point to main point. Organization is incredibly important, not just for communicating clearly, also so that the audience can remember and recall the information, and so that we are better able to remember and recall it, so that we don't have to work to memorize every single word we're going to say.
which, to remind you, is the patchy hair loss. They can inject cortisone shots into the patches on the scalp, and there's also anthraline creams and some steroids that you can take to try to regrow the hair. And most of the time for alopecia areata, it will regrow, but that's not to say you're not going to continue losing patches throughout your life, and you'll have to continue with treatments. There's also, for alopecia totalis, there's the oral corticosteroids, and then there's also PUVA therapy, or PUVA therapy. And with this therapy, you take a drug and then you're exposed to ultraviolet A radiation, and that radiation will increase your risk of cancer. So on the one hand, you can be completely healthy and be bald and still be beautiful, for bald is beautiful, or you can, try these treatments, try to regrow your hair and try to look like everybody else and risk having cancer. I would personally just rather be healthy. In alopecia universalis, which is the type that I have, total body hair loss, you can try some of the treatments that the totalis patients and areata patients have tried, but with such extensive hair loss, good luck growing your hair back. And if you do, it's probably just going to fall right back out quicker than the other kinds. So the best bet is just to get a hair prosthesis, which I have. This is from Locks of Love. And this at least alleviates the psychological pain. Today I've given you a brief overview of what alopecia is, who it affects, and some of the treatments that are available.
As you can tell, she is already transferring to her conclusion, and she does it very specifically by reviewing all of her main points. She doesn't go into subpoints, she doesn't go into support, she just lists her main points. It's as simple as that, because we remember what happens first in a speech and we remember what happens last. This is something called the primacy recency effect. And if that is the things that we're going to remember, then we should review and preview all the information that we're going to discuss in the speech.
Alopecia makes your hair fall out. That's about it. So if one of you happens to get this disease, or you know somebody who gets it, at least you now know what it is and that it's not life-threatening, just life-altering. Thank you.
So, a very well done speech. Are there still things that are wrong, things that she could improve upon? Absolutely. With public speaking, there are always going to be things to improve upon. So, our goal is constant improvement, not for perfection. Let's go ahead. So this overall was a preview of the informative speech so that we all have an idea of where we are going to be going from now to informative speech day. Let's continue to persuasive. Persuasive speeches are to influence the audience. They change or reinforce the audience's attitudes, beliefs, or behaviors. We are going to be focusing on changing or reinforcing a specific behavior. The reason for this is because we are going to use a problem, cause, solution organization, which is more focused in behavior. And to make it relevant to the audience, we want to give them a specific behavior that they have to then do. And this also plays into a call to action, which is needed for a persuasive speech, what the audience should do next. It should not be so big that it's impossible for the audience to do, but not so small that it won't really solve the problem. A good example of this would be global climate change. I would not ask you to buy a $50,000 electric car, but what I may ask you to do instead is to not eat meat or not eat beef specifically 5 out of 7 days. That could make a very good impact on global climate change. And then we have entertaining. These happen on special occasions. One example would be to introduce a speaker, accept an award, present a memorial, celebrate their achievement. Special occasion speeches are incredibly fascinating. However, we do not have time to discuss them, but the general idea is that they are on culturally significant days or moments, and by sharing why these situations are so valuable, they reinforce our cultural values and build a sense of community around these values. Again, I wish I could talk about it more, but I can't. Next, we talk about audience. In informative speeches, in persuasive speeches, in special occasion speeches, we have to engage in audience analysis. If we do not engage with audience analysis, then we only have control over half of our speech. Let's watch a small video.
You know, it's their country, and the government ought to reflect their traditions and their history. All we expect is people to be treated with respect, and there to be self-governance in a way that tolerates differences of opinion. Yeah. Peter, are you going to ask that question with those shades on? No, I'm interested in the shade look, seriously.
All right, I'll keep it then.
For the viewers, there's no sun.
I guess it depends on your perspective.
Touche.
Excellent. So, was there anything wrong with what happened here? Well, if you looked at the top left corner of that video screen, then you would notice that the reporter is in fact blind. Let's get this out of the way. Of course, George Bush did not know that this person was blind, and he's not making a statement about blind reporters or anything like that. Honest mistake. But did that change the coverage of this press conference? No, it wasn't about the press conference anymore. It was about how he insulted a blind reporter. So by engaging in at least a little bit of audience analysis, we will be able to avoid these situations and will be more effective with our message. Again, as we know by the communication model, I send out information, but it is also your job to then receive it. So if I don't know the audience, then I only have 50% of the message, and it is up to you to create the other 50%. Some other things to keep in mind are expectations of the situational factors. In specific situations like this, there are specific expectations of preparation, of content, and even of time. If I were to keep a class an hour over this time limit, people would probably riot, justifiably so. So the audience has certain expectations of a situation, and you have to be able to accommodate to those expectations, or else the audience will either stop listening or will not have the right meaning for the speech. Also, demographics are important. Systematic study of quantifiable characteristics of a large group can be important. Some of the demographic information could be things like age, gender, socioeconomic status, geographical things, co-cultures that they are a part of. These are all things that we can use, but if we rely on them too heavily, then and we use culture-specific references, then we could fall very much into pandering, which we want to try to avoid as well. Let's go ahead and jump in.
Following up.
So there are demographics, specific information, and culture-specific references. The reason why we want to try to avoid these is because if we use these, first of all, it shows like a lack of respect for the person, but also no audience is going to be completely what we call homogeneous, meaning that all the audience is the same or has the same demographic information. So we want to be sure that we may use examples, statistics, and testimonial that are relevant to that experience, but not culture-specific references. We're going to talk about this a little bit more.
I want to win this election so darn badly that I am willing to do this.
That's House Speaker Paul Ryan waving the terrible towel, a Pittsburgh Steelers tradition, while talking to the Pennsylvania delegation at the Republican National Convention. The only problem is that the RNC is in Cleveland, home of the Steelers' rivals, the Cleveland Browns. Ryan was blasted on Twitter for disrespecting the host city, joining a long list of politicians who have tried to pander using sports only to strike out with voters. During his 2004 presidential campaign, John Kerry seriously hurt his chances in Wisconsin by flubbing the name of the Green Bay Packers' famous stadium, calling it Lambert Field instead of Lambeau Field. Carly Fiorina was so desperate to drum up support ahead of this year's Iowa Republican caucus that she said she would cheer for the University of Iowa over her alma mater Stanford in the 2016 Rose Bowl. It didn't work. The Hawkeyes got crushed 45-16, and Fiorina got less than 2% of the vote. Maybe the most embarrassing instance of pandering gone wrong is Ted Cruz seeming to forget basic basketball terminology altogether in Indiana.
You know, the amazing thing is that basketball ring.
And his supporters didn't look happy about it. Even successful campaigns aren't immune. Donald Trump said he was worried about attendance at a California rally because San Francisco was playing in the NBA Finals. The Golden State Warriors left San Francisco for Oakland in 1971. Hillary Clinton hasn't had much to say about athletics this campaign, but she's no stranger to controversy over her sports loyalties.
Well, now, the fact is, I've always been a Yankees fan.
I thought you were a Cubs fan.
I am. I am a Cubs fan. But I needed an American League team.
For Newsy, I'm Grant Sunison.
So, to be back in 2016. But anyway, these were all culture-specific references, and if they are wrong as well, then that is even worse. So we want to be sure that we're avoiding that. Now we move to audience, understanding our audience further, and then expecting a response. And how to better adapt to them. Audience motivation is important, whether or not they're mandatory or volunteer. Mandatory meaning that they were forced to be here, whereas volunteer is where they volunteered to come see me. A good volunteer may be you chose to go see your favorite politician, or maybe went to go see your favorite comedians or singer speak. At that point, that is a very volunteer audience, and it doesn't require as much of engagement. And it also means that you probably have some prior knowledge of this topic. Mandatory audiences may require a lot more engagement. For example, this class, you are forced to be here in some way, because if you don't come, then you lose points. Who could have ever imagined? But we want to be, but with this mandatory audience engagement, as well as understanding that we may have differing levels and are probably newer to this information, is something to keep in mind. Common ground is also important, or homogeneity, where do we believe the same things, the speaker and the audience, but also is there sameness within the audience? Because if it's more or less the same, then you can focus your examples and testimony and statistics on support that would be relevant to my audience. We also want to determine prior exposure. Have they heard the argument before? Keep in mind, information has to be new, relevant, and useful to this audience. And dispositions. What are their pre-existing attitudes and feelings toward the topic? If they agree with you already in a persuasive speech, then you may need to motivate them into action. Whereas if they disagree with you on your speech, and they care a lot about it, then it may be my goal to change their minds by focusing in things that they can agree with and then slowly guiding them towards my point of view. How do we find these answers? Well, surveys, interviews, and maybe even just direct observation are all ways that we can get this sort of audience information. A good example of this, of understanding our audience, was that Walt Disney, let's go all the way back to when Walt Disney, the animation was not, it was not uh, unionized. It was not unionized. At this point, what he did was there were a lot of union leaders trying to get his animation company to unionize. Walt Disney didn't want to do this. So he went over to his, he got everyone together and he did a public speech for them. He said, paraphrasing here, if you want to get ahead, if you want to make as much money as these good animators, then you got to work harder, and then you'll get to my level. He did more for the unionization of Walt Disney Animation in that moment than those union leaders had done in months of work. So we want to be sure that we understand our audience. Now on to the message. We want to be sure that we are choosing topics that we care about, that we know, and topics that the audience cares about as well. Keep in mind, what is it that interests you, and focus on that. When you are passionate about your topic, it makes everything easier. The research will be easier, the development of your ideas will be easier, and even the delivery will be easier. Then we have to develop a bunch of information, brainstorming and clustering. Then we narrow down our topic by evaluating these ideas, and then coming up with a topic revelation statement or thesis statement. I use those terms interchangeably, but that conveys the central idea or core assumption about the topic. So when we have what we care about, we can brainstorm, write down topics indiscriminately. Makes sense. We know that one. But what we can also do is, if we already have a general idea of what we want to do, then we can cluster from a single topic to multiple topics. For example, if I wanted to choose something about elephants, then I could cluster around that idea. Things like the ivory trade, their habitat, it as an endangered species, what its tusks are used for, how it gives birth, what and other maybe animal rights abuses within the circus. All of these are clustered outside of this topic, but are all tied to this general idea. Then we have a topic revelation statement. This should be in a conversational voice, should have a time indicator, today, for the next few minutes, or this afternoon. A communicating verb, I will describe, I will teach, I will argue, I will inform, I will persuade. And then any vibrant adjectives you have. So, for example, if I were to choose something about elephants, I would say, for the next few minutes, I will inform you as to the plight of the African elephant. And just like that, I have a specific topic revelation statement with topics as well as main points. They should be one single idea, meaning one sentence with no ands. Because if there is an and in there, it means that I have two ideas and not one. The goal of the organization is to focus, not to expand, narrow the focus instead of expand the focus. Now we go from the general idea of the topic to research. That is the next step. Developing and strengthening expertise on the topic is a main goal of why we engage in research. Guess what? We may know a lot about this topic already, but We will not know the topic fully unless we do research. We also can find evidence that will support your ideas and make your ideas clear, understandable, and pertinent to the audience. In other words, example statistics and testimony that are adapted towards the audience's understanding. How do we do research? Libraries are highly valuable. Asking librarians, that helps. A catalog, which is like that little Rolodex thing, yeah, that's there too. Reference works like encyclopedias, yearbooks, quotation books, and biographical aids are all very useful within the library. But we live in the 21st century where we have beautiful things called databases, which have full access to magazine articles and newspapers, full television radio scripts, information that is updated weekly, and articles with higher editorial scrutiny. What happens from these peer-reviewed journals is that a researcher spends years working on a topic. They do a literature review. They do research outside. They find some sort of scheme and they go with it. Then they send it to the publisher. The publisher then sends it out to multiple of their peers and they say yes or no. Yes, it's good. Needs some revisions or no. And if they say no, gets thrown in the trash. That's it. So this is of much higher editorial scrutiny, and as a result, it provides the gold standard of information. When searching these library databases, learn simple Boolean terms. And, or, but, not, are three of the Boolean terms that are very useful. And narrows the focus, but, expands the focus, and but narrows the focus but only slightly. Follow the directions of the database that you are using. When you understand the database better, it will make it easier for you to research it. We also, some of the newspaper periodical databases include ProQuest, LexisNexis Academic, or World News Digest. Academic databases could be Academic OneFile, JSTOR, Google Scholar, although probably not best to use that. We could even use search engines to get some of the surrounding information. Virtual libraries like the IPL.org, government resources. Wikipedia is not one that we should use because we can change those. That information can be changed by anyone, so we want to be sure that we're not using it. So we will now talk about how to research at CSUF. Hello and welcome back. So I have just brought us to the Cal State Fullerton homepage. At this point, you're going to then go to Menu and go down to the Pollock Library. This is where all of the databases are housed. Once you click this button, then it will guide you to this. And look, there's a lovely search bar. Wow, I should totally use it, right? Wrong. You instead want to click onto the databases. At that point, you can search databases by subject if that's what you're interested in, or you can go by database name. At this point, I can just go to EBSCO, or you know what? I'm instead just going to go through this way to communications, because sure, why not? Communications, sciences, and disorders, sure. And then we go to academic premier EBSCO, and then I will eventually get to this page. And look, my campus portal login information. All I have to do is just simply log in and just watch as magic happens, and we are now in the database. At this point, I can put things into each of the search bars as well as add the Boolean term. And again, for example, and so if it were a Venn diagram, and this circle is communication, and this circle is nursing, then Where those two overlap, and only where those overlap, would be what my search criteria would give me at this point, if there is an and. Whereas or would cover all of the Venn diagram, and not would cover communication mostly. But everything that has nursing in it as well would then be removed from my search criteria. And if we search, we will be able to find some stuff. Look, 10 out of 27,982 sources. Obviously, this is too much. And it doesn't work. It gives you some of the most relevant information on the top, but it doesn't make it relevant for you, or at least not very much. And that's why you should use multiple searches, and you can even change the publication date right over here to, let's say, within the last 20 years. And that has not really reduced it that much, but it has reduced it at least a little bit. And if that's not enough, then I can go maybe to 2010, and that reduced it a little bit more. As you can see, there is a lot of information on these academic databases, and we want to be sure that we are using this information because, again, it is the gold standard of information. Now that we have this great information from these sources that we found on the internet, we then have to evaluate them, because guess what? Not everything on the internet is true. Go figure, I know, so weird. We want to make sure that it is credible, and the most effective way we could do that is by finding the same information from multiple credible sources. We want to make sure that the information is up to date, that it is compelling information, aka it's good and going to support our arguments, that it is also accurate, it is relevant, and it is reliable. So we want to be sure that these sources are of sufficient quality. And once we have this research, we can then transfer it to support. The big three types of support are examples, statistics, and testimonial. Examples are things that have happened. For example, a brief example may be if you're talking about times that people were disadvantaged, you may talk about a specific example in history. You could have an extended example in the, let's say, the Diary of Anne Frank. That would be an extended example of someone's experience through the Holocaust. And you could also have a hypothetical example, but this is only as effective as whether or not it is believable. Also, we have statistics and numerical data. This information needs to have citation, otherwise it is not useful, and it should be. We should try to put it in terms that the audience is able to understand it. How many people is 20,000 people? Hard to say, but by putting it in human terms, as in the amount of students enrolled at Cal State Fullerton this semester, that makes it a lot more relevant for us. And we have testimonial. This could be expert testimony or lay testimony. Lay testimony focuses in someone's perspective or opinion about something. This could be a Black Lives Matter protester or a Occupy Wall Street protester and why they're doing what they're doing. Whereas an expert testimony focuses in facts and what is, as well as predicting the future. This may be a scholar talking about income and wealth inequality or racial inequities within America. We also have some other support. Personal experience and narration, as I've said before, can work. Also definitions, descriptions, and explanations. These do not work on their own because they are not really supporting anything. They are just explaining or describing the support that you already have. Examples, statistics, or testimonial. Then we have visual and audio aids. This can also act as support. If you are talking about the destructive capability of this particular earthquake, then you may show a video of this earthquake. And a comparing and contrasting, either literal or figurative, can also be useful if we're trying to understand something. We also want to be sure that we are being ethical in our speeches. We want to be sure that we're checking our goals to make sure that they are in fact ethically sound. Also be prepared for each speech. If we are not prepared, then we could potentially give the audience the wrong information. Also be honest in what you say and not just leave things out because they don't go with your argument or with your information. Also avoid name calling or other forms of abusive language, because if we name call, it is very much that label and saying that because they are this label, they are not, you should not listen to them. And that diminishes the public forum, the area for idea exchange. And implement these, put them into practice. Plagiarism is more than just copying. To present another plagiarism is to present another person's language or ideas as your own, to give the impression or idea that you have written or thought something yourself that you have actually taken from someone else. Obviously, this is not okay and will have serious consequences both personally and professionally, and we won't be friends anymore. I know. And that's the biggest one I can tell. But one of the big challenges I have with this is that a person has worked for maybe weeks, maybe months, maybe even years to give you this information. The least we can do is cite the information. So, and the last part of being ethical is listening to our audience. Be courteous and attentive to when they are talking. We want to treat others how we would like to be treated. Also, avoid prejudging the speaker and strive to understand them and not defensively or selectively listen. And maintain free expression of ideas. It is what democracy is founded on. So even if you do not agree with what the person is proposing, take it in and understand it. Just because you understand someone's point of view doesn't mean that you are going to have to change your mind about it. That concludes this chapter. Have a great rest of your day.